Good morning and welcome to Sunday Assembly Manchester YouTube world. Sunday Assembly is a secular community that celebrates life. Every Sunday morning we've been meeting and celebrating life, that we are alive and we've got through this unbelievable pandemic. I know we're still in the middle of it. We keep thinking there's light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel keeps going a little bit longer. But we've been keeping ourselves very happy here at our Sunday Assembly in Manchester, and it's been so wonderful to have loads of amazing poets and speakers here. Our theme for today, I should introduce myself, I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Louise, your host for today. We've had loads of different themes over the weeks, it's always something different, and today we're looking at literature. Amazing. Now, I was a little bit scared about thinking about literature because when I was younger, I didn't like reading. I hated it. I found it really difficult. I read two books, which I didn't finish, Silence of the Lambs and Les Miserables, which is 1,200 pages long and probably shouldn't really have started off with that book. I never actually got to the end of it, but I surmised from the musical. I mean, the musical's long. You want to see the book. It's a long piece. So I was really put off by reading. And then several years later, when I was in my 30s, I found out that I was dyslexic. And it was a huge eye-opener because I was like, that's why. Because I could never remember what I'd read, and it was really annoying and difficult to read. And once I found out the reason, suddenly made a lot of sense. And I read more then because I thought, that's why reading's hard. But that's okay, I'm going to read. Whereas before I used to think, well, why is it so hard? I won't do it. Do you know what I mean? So that's my story with literature. And so it might be yours. You might be someone who is an incredibly good reader, who loves reading, and that's your thing. Or you might be someone who, like me, struggled a little bit. So I just wanted to give you the two different sides to the same thing. But we are going to talk about it with our speaker, and we've got an amazing poet for you as well. Here at Sunday Assembly, we have three little phrases that goes with us. Help often, wonder more, and live better are our phrases that stay. And we started, first of all, in London. Not us, we're Manchester. But originally, Sunday Assembly started in London, which I think our poet might be there right now in London in some secret location. So it started off in London, and then we, about 8 months later, started in Manchester with Sunday Assembly Manchester, and it's been brilliant to be a part of it all this time. So I'm just going to have a look at some books that you've been putting in the chat box. Yes! Lena's just telling us that she has dyslexia and dyspraxia. Yeah, I have dyspraxia as well. Adam's gone for the Discworld series, so he's going to go for the full set of volumes there by Terry Pratchett. And who else have we got in here now? We've got loads of great books. You guys are great readers. There was a little sarcastic comment, I'm guessing, but I don't know. 50 Shades of Grey, very popular book. And I noticed they had a very discreet cover for a long time because people were just reading it on the tube. Let's introduce then our poet for today, who's going to make us wonder more, I'm sure, and laugh loads. That should be one of the things. Why isn't one of our things laugh loads? I'm going to write in and demand that. Julian Daniel is our poet for today. Can you reveal your secret location? You're a Mancunian, aren't you?
I am a Mancunian, but I'm out in Bermondsey at the moment, and it's bright, sunny weather. There's a bit of grey skies, but the sun is out. So obviously you can't travel, but if you were, you'd come to a lot of sun here.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Julian, for that. And I believe you've got a very overpriced street food market by you.
Very next door to us, yeah. But overpriced street food is very popular here in London. Hopefully one day that will catch on in Manchester, where you can just sit outside residents' houses and pay far too much for food that you could probably get a lot cheaper somewhere else, or just eat at home. I don't know. It's a crazy idea, but
we have that, and it's called the Christmas markets in Manchester, where we eat very expensive pancakes in the pouring rain. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our poet for today, Julian Daniel. Go wild!
Yeah. Good morning. So I thought I'd do my poetry with a poem that sort of introduces me to you. So it's called An Open Book. I am an open book. What you see is what you get. Maybe not an open book. I'm more an open book facing down. No. Maybe not face down. I'm a closed book facing upwards. No. To be fair, I'm a book on a bookshelf in a bookshop. No, actually. No, I'm a germ of an idea in a writer's mind. There is no writer. I am a lover, not a fighter. I'm not a lover or a fighter. So I think you've got a better idea as to who I am from that poem, I feel. So now that we're sort of being introduced, I'm going to go on to my next poem, which I've titled "I Think I'm Alone Now." Yeah, it came to me inspirationally. So it goes like this: You're never alone if you're one half of a human clone, or if you've got an extremely vigilant chaperone. You're never alone if you're a member of Irish man band Boyzone, or you've got sweet-smelling pheromones. You're never alone in a collective groan, or you live in a major city like Cologne. You're never alone whilst you have Tinder on your phone, or during a sale at discounted footwear store Shoe Zone. You're never alone when bringing down the tone, or when your cover's been blown. You're never alone when doing 48 in a 30 zone, or you're a polymer like silicone. You're never alone when killing two birds with one stone, or when defaulting on a payday loan. You're never alone unless you're on your own. And with the prevalence of surveillance, we're probably never truly alone. So yeah, just watch out what you're doing. There's a lot of CCTV everywhere. Just be careful. So the next one is called Walls. My titles are very simplistic, as are my poems, as you may be able to tell. So this one's Walls. Walls have cracks. Walls have tests for damp. Walls have cavities and the capacity to separate cities. Walls have paper that used to be used to back exercise books. Walls can go up and walls can come down. Phil Spector created a wall of sound. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Pink Floyd identified we're all a brick in a wall. David Beckham bent balls round walls. Metaphoric walls can close in. Bedroom walls can appear to spin, especially after too much gin. Walls can provide shelter and can surround and contain. Walls can shape your election campaign. Imaginary walls can be built to protect from our fears. But one thing I've learned over the years is that walls don't have ears. So you heard it here first. Walls don't have ears. People tell you they do, but it's not true in my experience. Maybe it's different in different places. But you know, let us know. Put it in the chat if you found a wall with ears. Okay, so this next one. So I am from Manchester and I've lived in London for a long time, like too long. But like maybe 10 years. It's not straightforward living in London. And I wrote this poem probably after about 6 or 7 years in London. And it's called Broke But Not Yet Broken. It's expensive, you see, living in London. I hear invoices in my head. I hear invoices in my head. I hear invoices in my head. Spreadsheets merge with bed sheets, taxing me of sleep. Since moving north to south, I've been living hand to mouth. I've had to duck and dive, swallow my pride, leave my ego at the door, like a pilot going to war. I've had to beg, steal and borrow, buy today and pray for tomorrow. My little nest egg is looking decidedly small, as I constantly plunder Peter to pay Paul. I'm officially struggling against the tide, and now my credit card's been declined. I can't afford my bus fare home, and even Wonga has refused me a loan. It's no wonder I'm feeling kind of tense when I have to consider if heating is a viable expense. If I'd got myself a trade, I'd be much better paid. But it's hard to be funny when you've got no money, to make a joke when you're cold stone broke. You tried being creative when hiding from the bailiff. I'm fully aware that money doesn't grow on trees, no matter how many times I say please. That there are no easy answers at the back of a book. I should know because I've had a sneaky look. But keeping my head above water has proven harder than it ought to. So that's my advice for anyone thinking of moving to London. Well, the first thing I'd say is probably don't. But if you are, I would seriously look at your finances before moving. Very expensive city, very expensive city. But yeah, I don't want to put anyone off. You know, we could do with a few more people living in this city. It's very, very, very quiet. Not enough people in London, I find. So yeah, come along, enjoy it. So this is my next poem. It's a peace poem. I wrote it as my peace poem, and it's called "Living in Harmony." I am brown, he is white. She is fruity, they are quite nutty. We are French, we are Indian, yet we all stand side by side without fear or dread. If only humans were more like bread. So yeah, that's my peace poem. Hopefully from that. I did write it a few years ago and peace didn't immediately come from that poem, but I'm persevering. I think that's what you've got to do. I think with anything you do, I think you've got to persevere, and then you see the results. If not immediately, then maybe after a little bit of time. Okay, so this next poem is one called "Now It's Time for the Football Scores." ITV2 +1 0. Working 9 to 5 1. Mange 2 3 Touche 3. The Jackson 5-4, S Club 7, 2. Amiga 3-1, U2's 1, 4. PlayStation 2-3, your P45, 0. Levi's 501, 4, the famous 5, 3. WD41, UB40, 3. 1066 versus 1966, evening kickoff. And finally, Ardu T22, Desmond 222. So yeah, that's just like an alternative football scores if you didn't notice. They're not actual football teams that I mentioned then. There were other things that have numbers in them. So that's literature for you. I think as the theme goes, it is literature. I feel like I'm highbrow literature though. So yeah, I think this is going to be my last poem, and I wanted to end on a bit of motivation. So I've written a motivational poem. And I think after this, you'll all be moved to do something great on the rest of your Sunday. But obviously, stay till the end of the show. Don't just leave after me. That'd be a bit rude. So it's called a motivational poem. If Jackie Chan can, if Amir Khan can, if an African American can, if the people of the Cancun can, if your next of kin can, if the film festival in Cannes can, if King Kong can, if a Coca-Cola can, if Chili Con Carne can, if Zinedine Zidane can, if a Duran Duran fan can, if a troupe of burlesque dancers can, then you can. Please note, the Ku Klux Klan, they can't. Sometimes you have to have an exception. Anyway, that's been me. I hope you've enjoyed. Enjoy the rest of this Sunday assembly, and enjoy the weather wherever you are. Thank you.
Julian Daniel, everybody, please show your appreciation in the chat box and just generally wave and flail about. Julian, a very quick question for you. Now, people have asked about a website you might have, but I believe you have a podcast. One better.
Sorry, just a technical issue. Yeah, I do. I have a podcast. We're called The Three Prong Attack. I'm prong one in the Three Prong Attack. My co-presenter is prong two, and we like to call the listeners the third prong. So we're on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud, we're on iTunes, anywhere you get your podcast from, apart from BBC Sounds. We're not on BBC Sounds because we're not affiliated with the BBC. I'll put in the chat a link to any way you can find us. I'm also on Twitter @unknowncomic. So when I used to be a bit younger, I used to do a bit of comedy. Do less so now with family and work commitments, but I've still kept that moniker @an unknown comic. I can put that in the chat as well. But I hope people did enjoy. I'll look at the chat later, analyse the words, and if anyone said anything negative, I will find them.
You should
And
make a poem out of it.
I will, yeah, I'll make a little poem.
That's your next poem. Can I just ask you quickly about writing? I gave 2 ideas. I have a feeling that some of our assembly members here are very well-read, intelligent people. I wasn't. How did you get into writing, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I've never really saw myself sort of as a writer or anything like that. I kind of had ideas, and then I used to do hospital radio, so I used to write little bits for that. And then I went to
what radio station were you on?
We were on Manchester. It was the one at St Mary's on Oxford Road. It was the same guy. Me and the prompter have been for a long journey through hospital radio to being quite a very niche podcast. We've been on a very long journey. But in terms of writing, I went to the Contact Theatre in Manchester. I did a writing workshop with Lem Sissay, and just developed writing. I went to see some comedy poets, Marvin Cheeseman, Hovis Presley, and they made me think, oh, maybe I could write sort of like, I've always tried to do humour, but when you're learning poems at school, it's normally like war and quite bleak subjects.
It is very war, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, and when you're 14, 15, the idea, it seems quite hard. So when I saw these comedy poets, that sort of blew my mind a little bit. So I just started writing around that, very, very silly, as you've sort of seen with the poems I've done, and then just developed that way, sort of just doing it in front of an audience, seeing what sort of works, which things don't, and then just keep writing and performing. I think would be my advice is, do what you like. I don't do so much now, but I still sort of have ideas and I write around different things. Like Twitter's quite good for little things that you do, and social media is good. You get a bit of response to see which things work or not. But I think live audience is still a great way of developing.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Julian.
No problem.
Go away and read your lovely comments. You've got 16 of them now.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Julian Daniel, everyone, go wild. Yay. Amazing. Great. Cheered up morning for me. And I feel like the sun has just come up over Tameside, so that's nice. Very rarely happens, but it has. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all our patrons on Patreon. Hooray for you! Round of applause for you. The details are in the chat box if you would like to donate. We are completely voluntary run. We do it voluntarily. So it'd be really cool if you could donate. But if you can't, that's totally fine. But it would be great if you could. Amazing. Thanks so much. So hopefully we've been very much inspired. I was very confused by the scores of the of the football that Julian just shared with us. Very hilarious, very confusing. But I was very motivated by his can. And I feel that I'm already living better because of Julian's existence. So that's great. So his details will be in the chat box. And now we're going to move on to our next amazing, talented person who is a writer. I'm going to bring him to your attention right now by spotlighting him. It's Sahid Hussain! Go mad, everybody! Come on! Go wild! Hello! Hello, Zahid!
Morning, how are you?
Lovely to see you. I'm very well. Now, normally I would disappear now, but I'm going to stay on and have a chat with you, if that's okay.
Oh, before we chat, can I just say that if anyone can, Julian can. And people may not know this, and this is a frightening thing to know. I mean, it's on Wiki, it's on everywhere, really, is that Craig Daniel still lives in the shadow of his actually better looking and amazing twin brother, Julian.
Yeah.
He has nightmares.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Yes, absolutely. I love your shelves, by the way.
This is my office. So it's not one of those kind of, I've got all the books in the background and aren't I amazing? I actually work here, so.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But also,
yours are beautiful. Yours are very colourful.
Mine are fake. Background.
I didn't want to say it, but yeah, lovely fakeness.
Thank you. I love my fakeness too. Welcome. So tell me about you. You are a writer. You have written about one of my favourite places in Manchester that we have just alluded to, or you've written a book about around it, the Curry Mile.
Yes,
Now,
I
I'm
have.
sure it's famous beyond Manchester if you're outside of Manchester, but we have an incredibly long street of restaurants in Manchester, which people travel to, which we lovingly call the Curry Mile. What was your inspiration for your book? Did you take it
Wow.
from?
I think anybody who lives in Manchester and goes to the Curry Mile is just part of who you are, what you do. I mean, even during the lockdown, would you believe? I mean, people have like meeting points, and they'll say, "I'll meet you in front of such and such a place, or in front of Jaffers, or in front of the Milo." That's how they use the Curry Mile, even if it's not open. It's open to meet, and yeah, I think it's because it's such a springboard for so many communities. I mean, it is very different for what it used to be. I think there were close to 100 Indian restaurants and takeaways at one time. That number's gone down. The owners of the actual buildings haven't actually changed much, but we've seen so many new communities come in, Kurdish, even Somali, I believe, Iranian, and so on. So the mile is changing constantly, and I think it's just testimony to Manchester's diversity.
How has it been hit in COVID times? Has that been very difficult for people in the
Oh,
area?
extremely difficult. The business people, like everywhere else, have been very hurt by it. And on top of that, if you're familiar with the mile, you'll know that even before the COVID hit, there'd been like the bicycle lanes were put in, and the mile was shut down for a while. That affected business. When the COVID came in, there were all these kind of distancing measures that affected it. The parking measures have affected it. In fact, a lot of business people have gone out of business. There's a very high kind of attrition rate, but there's a lot of shisha places, so that's okay.
Exactly. No, that's good. It's good. People are doing the best that they can at the time. I'm sure they are. Tell me about your book then, without giving any spoilers away. What is it about?
Well, the original Curry Mile it was published in 2006. It's kind of set on the Curry Mile. So it's about a family which is in the kind of curry industry. The father, patriarch, he's got all these businesses here, there, and everywhere. And his daughter becomes his rival. So kind of a Bollywood-esque story of family rivalry and cutthroatness. I am in the process of actually rewriting it. Would you believe? I'm turning it into a trilogy, and it's the first book's more or less done. But it's because I've actually done the prequel trilogy to it, which I haven't published yet.
Amazing.
And I didn't want to do that until.
I was just going to ask, has it helped you during lockdown to get that work done?
It has actually. I mean, I've got young kids, so I'm quite busy anyway.
Yeah.
But I think having a little project on hand is really useful to keep the grey cells working. I mean, some writers have suffered, but I found it quite focusing. I mean, you're there a captive, in your own home, so you've got to find things to do or go mad.
I know, I understand, and I still have a lot of respect for you to be able to do any writing, because I live in a family full of very noisy children. I haven't been able to do anything at all. I've got no, because there's that story, isn't there? We did mention this early on at Sunday Assembly Manchester, that when Shakespeare was in his lockdown due to the plague, I think he wrote King Lear.
Yeah, I believe so.
No pressure. No pressure. I haven't written anything like that. So if you haven't yourself, don't worry about it. Wonderful. So tell me about your story of becoming a writer. Is it something that you've always been interested in?
It was something I was doing without realizing it. So from early childhood, I kept my first diary when I was 9 years old. And prior to that, I was more into comic books. And what happened was one of my aunts, she passed away, and I went with my mum. And I kept this diary. When I came back, I just kept it up, really. I tried to write my first novel when I was, I think, 14. But actually, I've written more poetry. So by the age of 18, I had it in my head I was going to write 2,000 poems, and I did. So, I mean, I'm a former regional slam champion, don't ask. I don't perform that often, but I do write poetry as well. I write pretty much everything, screenplay, plays, you name it.
I love that goal, 2,000.
I did just a figure, but it helped me. I mean, if somebody says to me, "Oh, I need a poem," and I've got some strange stories about that. In fact, I'll tell you one. You probably remember the late MP Joel Kaufman. He was having his 80th, I think it was his 80th anniversary, and my cousin. Now, this is pure coincidence. My cousin happens to be the councillor in Rusholme. He's called Rob Nawaz Akbar. We're actually cousins, and he's their Curry Mile, counsellor. It's funny, and he phones me up, and it's about I think it was about 3 or 4 o'clock, and he goes, "Oh, we're having a party for Gerald tonight. Can you write a poem for him?" And I said, "Eh, tonight? I'm busy." And he goes, "You're a writer?" I went, "What?" He says, "Yeah, we're having the event at 6 o'clock. So yeah, just do it." So I ended up writing this poem, and it's called Ode to the Silent Man of Westminster, because apparently that was his nickname. I didn't even know until I did the research. So I ended up getting into these scrapes where I have to do these poems at very short notice. And I suppose the experience of having done that when I was a teenager really helped to like turn on that switch. Because there is a switch for poetry, I think. You have to be in a, like a painter, when they look at the easel, they have to get that they look differently at things when they're painting or drawing. Even photographers, they look at things slightly differently. So the moment I actually found out I was a writer, I was in Europe. I was one of those Erasmus students. I don't know if you recall this kind of European exchange program.
To spend a bit of time abroad. Where did you go?
So estuve in Barcelona durante un periodo de mi vida. So I was there for a while. Wow. And I was sitting there. It was summer. I was in El Piso. I was in the apartment, and I was writing. And I thought, hey, it's hot. What am I doing inside? I'm writing. I can't be a writer, can I? And that's how it was. And that was my kind of moment where I thought, you know what? I must be a writer, because why the hell would I be doing this at this time? And so when I got back to Manchester, I got more involved in the kind of the performance and stuff. And that's when I got into the regional slam. And then I just kept writing, and I've just kept up writing. It is difficult with a family, with kids.
You mentioned about Curry Mile, about in your books. Is that inspired by real events?
Oh, now you're asking. Well, the events that are in there, the ones that are inspired, aren't inspired from the Curry Mile per se. I mean, I do have family that are in the trade, but I probably couldn't tell you the truth, because I probably would get shot then. So,
you'll have to read and wonder what it might be. I know that you've worked to sort of inspire people to get into writing. What do you think are the hurdles to people getting into literature generally, either writing or reading?
Well, reading, generally speaking, I mean, I'm a school governor as well, of a primary school. There is a growing gap between boys and girls. That is a major issue for cities in general. Cities tend to be more diverse ethnically, and you have a lot of children that speak another language. So, for instance, in Manchester, almost 70% of school kids are actually ethnic minorities, and almost the majority of them speak another language as their first language. So that you see, when all the materials are in English, or the vast majority, in a way, they're almost missing the issue of the reality of the minds and the landscapes of those young people. So there's a hurdle right there from the start, that their stories are not being told. I think since Black Lives Matter last year, there's been a much greater, much more of a concerted effort to get more diverse voices. It still feels a little bit unnatural, in the sense that the stories that are being told aren't necessarily the stories that, say, those communities would be telling. But I mean, for like 20, 30 years, there's been outcry that, why is it that, I mean, take a city like London. London's incredibly diverse. Yeah, if you take publishing as a whole, it's white, it's middle class, and it doesn't really reflect the cities of the United Kingdom, and certainly the reality of the children that want. I mean, you want to read a story that you can relate to, and you can't relate to it. So there's a lot of niche markets, whether it's be Black fiction or kind of people who want to write, read stories which are Christian Muslim stories. There's niches that you can find, but it isn't something that I would say is mainstream. So I'd say in a way the stories are emerging, but in general, they don't really reflect the realities of the children themselves. That itself is a hurdle. But in terms of getting published, I mean, Julian, others will tell you, it is really, really difficult to get published. The main bottleneck is actually the agents. You see, publishers in general don't take you on directly. They have to take you on via an agent. And agents essentially are business people. They have to believe that they can sell what you send them. And I think, and without getting too much in the history of publishing in the United Kingdom, into the mid 1990s, there was a fixed retail price of books. Now, that act was abolished, and what that meant was supermarkets came into the game. So that's ever since then, you can go down an aisle in a supermarket and see the best-selling fiction. So they started this war between the publishers and the supermarkets, but then Amazon came into this battle as well. And to be fair, publishers were probably still winning until the ebook standard was agreed about 15 or so years ago. And that's when Amazon just took off, with their kind of selling Kindle at a loss and so on. And they've set up their own publishing arms as well, by the way. So they have started to completely, let's say, dominate the industry. The other side of it, which you may or may not be aware, is that most publishing companies are part of larger groups now. So you take something like Puffin, which is part of Penguin, is actually part of Bertelsmann, which is a huge German conglomerate. Now, 30 years ago, to get a bestseller, you might sell a few thousand. No longer. In order to be a bestseller now, you probably have to sell a few 100,000. And that means that publishers in the United Kingdom, certainly, less so in the United States, they don't take risks. Now, I've met people who are like in the room when they bought J.K. Rowling's first book, Harry Potter, and I've heard them say, "We bought it for 2,000 quid. We didn't know it was going to be a success." And that's the truth. You don't know if something's going to make it. So what's happened is we live in a world of basically celebrities. If you're already big, you're going to get another deal. You're going to get another book. If you made it in cooking, doesn't matter what world it is. If you're famous or you're big on Instagram, you got a chance. But if you're a lowly ethnic minority writer, it ain't happening.
What can we do, Zahid, about that? So you mentioned some of the obstacles in the way, the fact that the stories aren't reflecting people's lives, there may be a second language, but also there's this issue with getting into this industry. What do you think can be done?
Oh, well, I think since Black Lives Matter, there's been a concerted effort to sign up a lot of debut Black writers. Those other ethnic minorities perhaps don't feel that they're getting that chance. I mean, I myself, I've recently set up a writing agency called the Muslim Writers North. So we're trying to create those pathways into basically mainstream publishing, the stage and on screen. And in fact, that's my kind of litmus test, which is I've had these debates with industry moguls, and I shouldn't name any. I won't name them.
No name.
So these are really big like agent, let's say companies, and I've said to them, look, where's your success? And they go, well, we've got such a writers now. We've got so many hundreds, and our readers are all diverse. And I say, all right, give me one ethnic minority writer who's won a BAFTA award for writing. And there you have it, silence. And Hollywood, same issue. Give me one writer who's ethnic minority who's made it through. Yeah, in Hollywood, you might find that there's more, say, ethnic minority writers coming through. But right now, we live in the age of Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus. This should be the golden age of writers from different backgrounds actually making it through, because you're in control. You can watch what you want. You're not like beholden to the channel to decide what's good for you. And what you've got is like, I'll end up watching a lot of, say, Mexican series or Korean series on whatever it is. And people get to choose. Now, there's a lot more choice, and therefore the real pressure on the Netflixes of the world is actually content. They've got to create content. And they're doing really well in different countries around the world, because they're actually encouraging local content to emerge on an international scale. I'll give you an example: the Turkish drama Ertugrul, which is about an Ottoman, a 13th century warrior. It's huge. It's one of the biggest series in the world. In Pakistan alone, 100 million people have watched it. And it's like, wow. And if it weren't for, say, the Netflixes or others doing this, where they're funding, basically opening up the global market to different languages and stories. And I think BBC and others, I'm just naming in general, they've really got a lot of work to do, because unless they do something now, sadly, they will become part of history. Yeah, exactly. And this is the moment where actually, Britain, we're so diverse. Why not use the stories that are here? If anyone can.
Yes, exactly, as Julian says. I'm just going to open up to any questions that anyone has. Please put it in the chat box if you would like to ask Zahid any questions. We have a question from Tony. Do you have a disciplined routine as a writer, or do you wait until the muse gives you inspiration?
Oh, very good question, that. Well, if you want to be a professional writer, you don't wait for the muse, or rather you sit down and then make sure the muse is there at the same time. You've got to have discipline. I'd say that you need to work out yourself. So how this works usually, because I do a lot of work with young people as well, and how do you do it? Well, I'm a morning person, so I tend to write better in the mornings, and it's a thing that I've got to do first. So that's what I'd say for me, is you need to find the time of day where it works for you. Others, maybe it's the music or it's the location, but you've got to find your triggers that make you write, or look at the things that are obstacles. So it could be, look, if you've got a young family and you've got kids crying, just forget writing for a while. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry, but if it's something else, like you need a laptop or something like that, well, do you? The way that apps are nowadays, it was a revelation. I couldn't believe it, to a mate of mine the other day, where I was telling him there's this speech to text apps. So at one time it was this kind of dragon speaking, like 20 years ago, right? And nowadays you've got really good apps on your phone, completely free. We just talk and it just types everything you're saying. So it's like, in a way, you've got to be your own friend and work out what it is that gets you into that space. Now, where it's most difficult is writers who are deeply kinesthetic. So for those writers, often these are poets. It is about the muse, which is that strength of feeling. So it could be that you've got to have a crisis in your life. You've got to feel that depth, whatever it is, that trigger of yours. And again, going for a walk, mulling over memories, looking at memorabilia, looking at whatever it is, you should be able to work out what your triggers are. If you can do that, you're well on your way to getting writing. But to be fair, writing is more than just writing. Most writing is editing. And this is where, in fact, most, I think, writers fall down flat on their faces, because they like making the babies, but nobody wants to raise the child. Right? We've got to be honest about this. They're two very different skills, aren't they? Are you going to be the big daddy or the real daddy? And or mummy and real mummy. It's a really, really difficult journey to be on, because you've got to both create it, but then you've got to judge it. So that means you've got to bring down the axe at times. This is that phrase about killing your darlings. You've got to be able to make really tough choices about what stays in and what goes out. I give you lots of examples of most professional writers, from what I know, they use professional tools. So novelists will tend to use things like Scrivener, which is a particular program. Most people write on Word or by hand, but you actually have tools like Scrivener which help you to organize everything, your research, and you don't need like one document for the entire novel. You can actually put the chapters or even scenes within a chapter into a separate kind of a shell, and you can move things around really, really quickly, and it can give you a corkboard view, or it can blacken the whole screen out and you're just writing. There's so many tools out there. They're not necessarily expensive as well, and they're well worth it if you take your writing seriously. But you have to know what it is that you want. Is it that you want just people to know about, just to read your stories? Then I'd say go indie publishing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If it's about sharing your work, this is honest truth. The majority of books on Amazon don't have an ISBN, which means they only have an Amazon code, which means they're not published in any library. Nowhere you'll find it except on Amazon, which means the majority of books are just completely independently published. And in fact, I'll probably say in kind of global top 10s, probably half of them are now independents. They're making more money being independent than going through mainstream fiction. But that's fiction. In terms of, say, poetry, look, the reality is that if you're a performance poet, then you make your money doing performances and workshops. If you're a so-called page poet, and you can't be both a page poet, somebody who's published and risen, what I find is a very rarefied world. It's quite elitist in some ways. My honest kind of trick is just get onto an MA program. You'll find that doors open for you. You can enter competitions.
We've got a couple of final questions for you, Sahid. Lynn is feeling, I think, upset about fantasy authors. You work it out from this question. Why are some writers like Stephen King able to churn out books every year, but certain fantasy authors can take a decade on each book? Are you waiting for Game of Thrones? Is that what your issue?
Well, I've seen that interview, and when he asked Stephen, he goes, "Well, how the hell do you write?" Well, I think it's the difference. Okay, the story is that when he was writing Game of Thrones, Martin, that basically he's a screenplay writer. If you know anything about him, he actually visualizes entire screens. Where Stephen King and him are both the same, they don't plan. They're what they're known as pantsers. They write from the seat of their pants. They don't plan at all. So they just start writing. Now, the issue for the writer of the Game of Thrones was that basically when he wasn't famous or not so famous, before the TV series, basically, he was fine. The moment he became famous, fans were writing in telling him what characters should do. Oh, that was terrible. Because that his process is, he would basically sit there and then the scene would pop into his head and he writes it. And then he'd wait again, but then all these people were telling him, no, do this. Oh, that's what actually took him the time, was everybody whispering in his ear. So in fact, their process wasn't that dissimilar, but you could say that maybe with Stephen is rigorous. He writes 4 hours every day, included Christmas Day. That's the guy. Who just doesn't matter. He's going to write. He said he actually used to like.
I think these people want this amazing magic potion that would create a book and a bestseller. But actually, it's like anything, tons of hard work generally, and being lucky. Just one final question. Sorry, we might have to take this off this chat and talk about, maybe put it in the chat box or something. But Lisa's just asking about indie publishing and also any online platforms in the Manchester area for poets or writers.
Well, indie publishing is really straightforward. You create the product, your book, right? And the secret, again, this is the secret. This is well proven now as a formula. If you want to make it big as an independent independent writer, it's about series of books. That's it. You aim for 5 to 10 books, maybe 8 is a good number. And what you'll find is naturally people read, and it's genre based. It's like thrillers, science fiction, fantasy, erotica, that sort of thing. And you'll find series sell. You get a good character name. It's almost formulaic, but this is how people read. They will read just thrillers, or they just read, fantasy. Just do it. But then it's about, well, how do I get it up there, the book cover and all the rest of it. This is why it's independent publishing and not self-publishing. You get the covers made for you. You get the books formatted for you. I mean, I'll tell you straight, Scrivener itself, it's about $30. You press a button and it basically creates the text straight away formatted for you. You've got a more professional, let's say, more slicker version called Vellum, which is just for formatting. And it's like $200-300. But it'll do ebooks and paper, and basically every single format that exists, whether it be Kobo, Amazon, you name it, it does it all in one go. So you just have to upload it. So the main battle for most writers would be the book cover design, and there's loads of ways to get very good covers. But the best way is for you to keep looking and know what it is that you think is a good cover. And most genres already have a fixed format.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Zahid. We could talk to you absolutely all day, but I'm going to call it there. Please let us know how we can get hold of your books and anything, if you have a website or anything, Zahid. I would love to.
It's on Amazon.
Amazon.
Website is zahidhussain.com. But really, I guess my kind of focus, I'm also focused on indie publishing, but I want to go the way of hybrid publishing. That's maybe not heard that term. It's where you have mainstream publishing, but you do other books on the side as well. And I think that's probably a happier marriage in many ways. And the reason for that is if you get a contract with a publisher, from the moment you sign it, maybe another year before it hits the shelves, and they don't like you to change genres. Whereas, and I say, certainly if you're a children's author, you find that mainstream publishing is probably the only way. Children's fiction doesn't do so well on kind of Amazon, if that makes sense. And parents and children, they want the tactile experience of the books, if you know what I mean. Whereas with genre fiction, it tends to be people who will just buy, on their Kindle or wherever it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, Zahid Hussain.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Best. Thank you so much for chatting to us today. Go wild, everybody. They're going claps. And also put your appreciation in the chat box as well so Zahid can read that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yay. Thank you very much to Zahid. Thank you very much to everyone joining in with the conversation. I some really interesting and exciting points made by both of our performers today. Thank you very much to Julian Daniel and Sahid Hussein for being our speakers today. Looking and thinking about literature, and from my own point of view, my dyslexia was the thing that stood in the way of my enjoyment of literature. And once I understood, this is my personal story, once I understood what was my barrier in a way to get to understanding what I was reading, suddenly it became a lot easier. And there are so many tools out there to help you if you're in a similar position. As soon as I knew there was text to, and I had the old Dragon software, talking to text, you can talk into your phones, there's different glasses you can use, different filters you can put over your computer, different fonts. I use a special dyslexic font that was formed. So there are ways to access literature in that way. And in terms of publishing, as we've said, I think I wish I had the figures on hand, but very few people ever get not legitimate, that's the wrong word, mainstream published, basically. Very few people. The chances are extremely slim, but that doesn't mean there isn't a world full of podcasts, a world full of writing. And as Zahid alluded to, sometimes the writing barriers can be things that are there for you because you're scared. And I actually read something recently that said a lot of poets and artists and writers don't want to be published because they're scared of what that might mean. So I want to encourage you, if some amazing thing strikes you in your mind one day and you feel like you want to write it down, or whether you're the sort of person who sits down and does 4 hours a day, do it. Do it. And yes, there are huge obstacles, but also just make sure the obstacles aren't things that you're putting in there because secretly you're afraid. I've got a manuscript in my house that I've never published and I probably never will, so I've got no room to talk. But I think we can have our own barriers, and as you say, if you want the world to read it and you just want to get it out there, then by all means publish or record whatever your art form is. So I wish you all the best with that, and thank you very much to our speakers. I'm going to say goodbye to YouTube now as we end our assembly.